That's Wes.
And he's Corey, and we're the Triflemen.
So I've been thinking a lot about guilty pleasures, whether it be movies, TV shows, in some case, music, songs.
Are there guilty pleasure books?
Yo, yeah, absolutely. I like to think about stuff when I say guilty pleasure. Some people might take that term a little differently than others, but what I mean is something that's not necessarily considered good, or in some cases, not necessarily something that you would typically associate with somebody like myself. And a good example of that for me is Speed Racer. Speed Racer catches a lot of shit for being a bad movie.
All right, look, I grew up watching the Speed Racer cartoon, and
which I hate, by the way.
That's ironic. I really enjoyed the cartoon growing up as a kid and loathed the movie when it came out.
First of all, it's got a great cast. The cast in that movie is excellent, as far as just the names.
I like Emile Hirsch. I like John Goodman.
Susan Sarandon, Christina Ricci,
It's almost as if they spent all of the budget on the cast.
I think they spent all the budget on the CGI.
I mean, the special effects were good, but you could have hired a couple of nerds in a garage to do that on the cheap.
I don't know. That is, to me, one of the most beautiful movies there is. Just the color pops all over the place.
It's vibrant. It's colorful. It is the Willy Wonka of racing movies.
I mean, that's a good way to look at it. It's just that it's even like the very beginning of it, when it starts off with that first race.
I remember when the trailer popped, I was really excited about it because the trailer looks good. But the trailer is all of the good moments. And that's a lot of trailers. I mean, I'm not going to... That's a lot of trailers.
Well, it is, but I disagree with that because, again, it is a guilty pleasure of mine.
Look, there was a time when I watched that movie where the best part of it was that Matt Fox was in it because I was a Lost fan and I like him. But now, if that movie's on, I'm not like, oh, wow, Matt Fox, he's in this. I'm like, oh, yeah, Matt Fox was in it.
See, and what's funny about that to me is he's about the worst part of that movie, I think. I thought he played it bland as he possibly could.
He's a bland actor.
I mean, he is.
This is going to go off topic. When you have a character like Matt Fox or a Tom Welling, because I know you're not a fan, because he's a bland actor.
Yes.
Okay. So Matt Fox, Tom Welling, these guys are the epitome of the protagonist of a story. Mm-hmm. They don't have as many lines as everybody else, and they don't do anything dynamic. Everyone is telling them a story, and they are reacting to the things going on around them.
They don't create the action comes to them.
Absolutely. But a character like Rex from Speed Racer is like, the action man of mystery. But yeah, you're right. Matt Fox is boring.
He is extremely boring. No offense, Matt Fox. I love you and all, but you're boring.
Lost was great.
Until the end, and it got really weird, went off the rails. But that is...
Hashtag justice for Saeed.
I blame my feelings on Lost, and a lot of people who agree, on the writer's strike of whatever year that was. And that's... I don't know that I want to get into the writer's strike right now, but that's a good conversation for down the road. But, because it killed Pushing Daisies.
I believe it was 2008, and I say that because it was right around the time that Heroes Season 2 got pinned, and that was an abomination.
Yes.
Not to be confused with the abomination from She-Hulk, which kicks ass.
Yes. Anyway, circling back.
Guilty pleasures.
Guilty pleasures. Fan of Speed Racer, and I've always been disappointed in myself for not seeing that in the theater.
Okay, because of the visuals and the colors.
I'd like to think that in IMAX would be amazing.
Like Doctor Strange.
Right. And Doctor Strange is one of those movies with the visual almost outpaces the story itself.
It tells the story.
Well, and I can't say that that's the case in Speed Racer. They did it for the sake of doing it.
I'll tell you a visual story told through a lot of special effects that's not so colorful, but is my guilty pleasure movie.
What's that?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay. And I see what you're talking about with the visuals there, because it's not over the top except for a few scenes here and there.
I mean, there's some over the top special effects, but they used a lot of puppeteering as opposed to CGI, which I understand people hate, but the hokiness is part of the magic. I love Labyrinth for the same reason.
Yeah.
But Hitchhiker's Guide to me is very special. I love all the characters. I love all the special effects. I love the story. I think it's very rooted in the original book and how the story was going. It does take a few liberties, but not as many as you'd think. I mean, there are things that are different. I'm not going to talk about the original book. I'm here to talk about the movie. That's my guilty pleasure.
Right.
Love Martin Freeman.
And he is so... Just he plays the straight guy in that so on point.
After he played Arthur Dent, I could not see him as anything else. When I'm watching him in Sherlock, that's just Arthur Dent pretending to be.
I'm inclined to agree with that sentiment. He's Arthur Dent. I was like, hey, look, it's Arthur Dent.
Exactly. But Alan Rickman, Sam Rockwell, Zoe Deschanel could not have been more perfect. You talk about perfect casting. Like those actors were married to those roles, and even the small roles, they didn't skimp out.
All right, so
John Malkovich.
All right, let's just kind of run down this cast, because I kind of want to cover some of the cast of this movie.
Okay,
and just kind of hit upon it a little bit. Moving on past Martin Freeman, Mos Def.
Okay,
Ford Prefect, man. Look, I never read the book.
Okay.
I heard about the book before the movie came out. I worked with a guy who was a huge fan and was excited, so I learned a little bit about it going into it. But I've only seen Mos Def in a handful of things, and he's a squirrely kind of guy. But the way he plays Ford Prefect is just perfection.
I think Mos Def brings it's a fish out of water quality to that role. But it's a fish out of water that's still able to ride the current with the rest of the fish.
Yeah.
And Martin Freeman he's the guy in the ocean that's about to drown.
Yeah. So moving on from him, you got Zoe Deschanel.
I just love her.
So I've been a fan of hers for a long time, probably since she played the sister in Almost Famous.
Right.
And there's a moment in that movie where she's giving him all her records and everything, and she's leaving the house because her mom's, insane or whatever. And she's like right in his face, so in essence, right in our face because she's in the camera. And I don't know, something about her face just caught me one day watching that movie, and I was just like, I like this girl. And I've been a fan ever since.
It's funny that we're talking about guilty pleasures and she comes up, because I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking how many movies she's in that I love that I would consider guilty pleasure movies.
500 Days of Summer.
The Good Girl. First thing that comes to my mind. She works in the department store.
You're talking about the show, right?
No, I'm talking about
I'm sorry, that's The New Girl.
Yeah, that's The New Girl. No, The Good Girl is a Jennifer Aniston movie.
I know what you're talking about.
It's got Jake Gyllenhaal. It's got John C. Reilly.
Seen it.
It's just a really bland visual movie. Everything's supposed to be depressing. It's like shopping in a Dollar General. So that's the whole feel. You're supposed to feel that because in the movie, that Jennifer Aniston character is meant to feel icky, for lack of a better term, because of the choices that she makes. But I'm not dwelling on the movie. Zoe Deschanel in that movie plays a loud, foul-mouthed cashier that's always does the announcements.
Okay.
And she always slips in dirty words and dirty phrases.
I have to watch this.
It's a good movie, but Hitchhiker's Guide, actors.
All right, so let's just move on to the next. Let's say next in line, I'm going to say that's going to be Sam Rockwell.
Sam Rockwell.
So I'm funny about Sam Rockwell.
Explain.
First thing I ever saw him in was The Green Mile. And pretty much everything I've seen him in since then, outside of a couple of things, he plays the biggest asshole. He plays an asshole better than just about anyone. And with the exception of Moon, which is a great movie. Have you seen Moon?
I've seen Moon.
Moon is fantastic. But I've always hated Sam Rockwell because he always plays an asshole. I mean, Hitchhiker's Guide. Like, I just want to punch him in both of his faces.
To coin a phrase, Sam Rockwell has a punchable face.
He absolutely does.
But
it's that shit-eating grin.
Okay, and for that very reason, I love him.
Yeah, he's great.
Galaxy Quest.
Okay.
Guy Fleegman.
Okay.
I didn't know his name, man. But, you know, I'm like that. I worked at a Blockbuster. I call everybody by the role that they played. Yeah. Sam Rockwell was Guy Fleegman for a couple of years to me, because that's the character he played in Galaxy Quest.
So for me, he was Billy the Kid.
I could see that.
Because he was so absolutely terrible in that. But he's great at it.
It depends on the project. You know, Matchstick Men is not a movie for me. But there again, Nicolas Cage.
You know, that's a movie that, despite all of its parts, is really interesting, but it's also very hard to watch.
It's hard to watch.
I've only seen it once, but I remember a lot of bits about it.
Sure.
Because they were like, there's several movies like that over the years. I've only seen one time, but there'll be something in it that just stands out.
So because of your deep-seated hatred for Nicolas Cage, but your clear enjoyment of Matchstick Men.
Well, and it's not that I enjoyed it.
But is it a guilty pleasure?
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's fascinating. I didn't say I liked it.
Okay.
It was fascinating.
House is fascinating, but I did not enjoy it.
I enjoyed parts of House.
Well, you talk about not liking somebody that's an asshole.
I mean, Hugh Laurie's a pretty good asshole.
He's a great asshole. He has to be an asshole in real life. No offense, Hugh, but you're an asshole.
Who knows? I don't know.
I loved him in Veep.
Well, that's funny because that's the most recent thing I've seen him in. I watched Veep again not too long ago.
And he was an asshole in that.
But he's a charming asshole.
Well, I didn't say he was a negative asshole.
And that's what separates him, because Sam Rockwell is just an asshole. Even as Justin Hammer wanting to be charming, he's still not, because he's such a icky bastard.
Yes. He almost seems like he should have a ponytail, but he doesn't have one.
I think, and this is just speculation, but I try to put myself into the heads of casting directors sometimes when I look at a movie or a TV show and see who's there. And I was like, okay, what made them decide on this choice? You know, and obviously there's a lot of factors at play. But when I see Sam Rockwell, if I'm thinking of a casting director, it's like, I need an asshole. Dennis Leary's busy. And Sam Rockwell's available. So, yeah, that's my guy.
Well, you know, it's funny you asked the question of, like, what makes casting directors make these choices. David Spade actually commented on this on a monologue on Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
And he was talking about how he was always cast as the snarky guy. But he said he didn't know what the word meant for a long time.
The word snark?
Yeah, he just thought it had to do with him being humorous, you know, like he was like quick-witted, he was snarky, you know? Yeah. But then when he found out, he's like, it turns out I'm just an asshole.
All right, so let's double back to that cast of Hitchhiker's Guide.
Okay. John Malkovich.
Of course.
You could cast John Malkovich to play Batman, and I'd buy it. It just depends on the Batman.
He'd make a solid Joker.
I was thinking that
20 years ago.
Right now.
He's getting a little old.
Why don't they do an old man Batman, old man Joker movie?
I don't know.
Forget the beginning. Let's see the end.
That would be fascinating.
Be great.
John Malkovich would be great for that.
Perfect.
Big fan of John Malkovich.
John Malkovich is a cut above at the same time, he is one of those people that he makes guilty pleasure movies. Con Air.
Con Air is a movie I bring up a lot.
Okay.
In a certain type of conversation.
Okay.
Now, everybody out there should know that I hate Nicolas Cage. Because Nicolas Cage is an idiot and he's ridiculous. That being said, he's in some things that I like. But I want to talk about Con Air.
Okay.
And I just want to talk about the cast of Con Air. Without even having to get into that cast. Just the people that are in it. Obviously Nicolas Cage, and he is so bad in that. That terrible accent, that mullet, the wife beater, like it's god awful.
He needed a paycheck.
And I bet he got a fat paycheck off of that movie. He was the top bill on that.
There was a dinosaur egg out there and he wanted to buy it.
But outside of him, that cast is one of the best casts I've ever seen assembled.
Steve Buscemi.
John Cusack. Love John Cusack. You say Steve Buscemi. Been a fan of his a long time.
If you're not a Steve Buscemi fan, well, you can just go to hell.
I mean, right. Dave Chappelle's in that.
I know a lot of people won't know this name, but Cole Meany.
I hadn't even got to Cole Meany.
Look, I'm a big Cole Meany fan.
That guy, he plays a good asshole. He has a face.
Such a good asshole.
You look at that guy and he's like, is that John C. Reilly's dad?
Exactly. But at the same time, loved him in Star Trek.
I've seen him in just so many random places here and there. And the funny thing is, I see him like, I know his name is Cole Meany, and it's like, getting Ving Rhames.
Well, I was going to say, there's some lesser-known actors whose names I don't know, but I recall them from other projects.
I'm working my way through that cast. It's ridiculous who all's in that.
Phantom Freak from Hackers is in it. I don't know the guy's name.
I think we're forgetting one or two in that movie.
Oh yeah, there's a few actors we didn't name.
And we're talking people here outside of Cole Meany and maybe Dave Chappelle that are A-listers.
Absolutely.
I mean, they're top bills. John Cusack, top bill. Nick Cage, top bill. John Malkovich, top bill. Ving Rhames has been top bill.
There's Oscars and awards and blockbuster films in that cast.
Honestly, Ving Rhames was probably the smallest name of those characters on that plane.
You're probably right.
The fact of the matter is that cast was loaded. Absolutely loaded to the gills.
So you're saying a ticket on that plane was pretty expensive?
So another one of my guilty pleasures, and this is actually a somewhat highly rated movie, but still a guilty pleasure because of how ridiculous it is, and that's The Fifth Element.
Man, I love The Fifth Element, man.
Dude, I love The Fifth Element. Look, I got a friend of mine, she lives in Minnesota now, who that was her favorite movie.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of weird because, I mean, she's a weird girl. And like it fits, but it's like it was so odd. But the movie, it's so great in so many ways. Like it's corny, it's over the top. The outfits are just ridiculous. Chris Tucker is ridiculous.
Well, to me, it's a satire, but what is it really a satire about? Is it a satire on modern day society? Is it a satire on science fiction movies? Is it a satire on politics? I mean, it sends up so many different things.
They add up the sum of these parts, create this masterpiece. Well, The Fifth Element is just like I said, it's a masterpiece. Again, another stacked cast. Gary Oldman, wonderful in that.
I mean, there's no reason not to say Chris Tucker.
But he's Chris Tucker, and he's typically annoying.
I mean,
that's his shtick.
Look, they went to Chris Tucker and said, "Man, we need you to be Chris Tucker for a little while and earn a little money
while wearing a ridiculous outfit."
You're gonna wear a ridiculous outfit. Yes.
Yeah. Let's see who else is in that. Debo, man.
Tiny Zeus Lester.
Exactly.
Bilbo Baggins is in that movie. The original Bilbo, not Martin Freeman from The Hobbit.
Yeah.
But older Bilbo from Lord of the Rings.
He's the archaeologist, isn't he?
He's one of the priests.
That's right. The priest, yeah, he's ridiculous. You know, the I forget what they're called, the assassin type aliens, but they're all super ugly.
The ones that are buying the guns from Zorg.
Yes, those. Well, you know, they're shapeshifters.
Sure.
And the one guy comes to, you know, each one of them's trying to get on the ship as Corbin Dallas.
Right.
You know, there's actual Corbin Dallas. There's the priest assistant Corbin Dallas. There's the third guy. Do you know who that guy is?
No, I do not.
It's a tall, skinny black guy, right?
Yes.
That's Tricky, the artist.
Okay.
So he's in Massive Attack, but he also is a solo artist, which I actually saw him once. Played the entire show with his back to the crowd. That's
bizarre.
It was bizarre, kind of unnerving.
You know, pianists will do that though.
Yeah, but he's standing up singing. You know,
that's weird.
Back to the crowd the whole time. Anyway, it's a random part for that guy. You know, Tricky. It's just so random. But I know who he is. You know.
Can we take a minute to just talk about how cool a name Corbin Dallas is?
It's pretty solid.
It's pretty cool, man. What's up, Johnny Utah? Which, hey, Point Break, another guilty pleasure movie of mine.
You know, I hadn't seen it in a long time, but I was never a real big fan of Point Break. But I was never a real big fan of Patrick Swayze in general. Yeah, man, Fifth Element is just a wonderful movie.
It is. Look, for a movie to be as dumb as it was, it had a good cast. It had good acting. It had good special effects. It was a blockbuster movie.
Luke Perry's in that movie.
He is in that movie. He is the archaeologist.
Well, yeah. I think he's the archaeologist's assistant.
But
back in the early 1900s.
There again, another actor that they just shoved in places.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't know what to do with Luke Perry outside of 90210.
Right.
I mean, he's in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
But, you know, I was never a huge Buffy fan. I remember seeing the original movie with Christy Swanson back in the day, though.
So, I loved Buffy. In my teens, in my early 20s, I was definitely one of those people who I watched Buffy way more than I probably should have.
Yeah.
To the point where I had the DVDs and I watched it so many times I had to start watching it with the director's commentary just to make it fresh. But now, I don't know if it's age. I'm not going to say that the show didn't age well because for what it was a progressive show. Just looking back on it after I know what I know about Joss Whedon, I just don't enjoy it like I used to.
You know, it's funny you say that. I'm a big Firefly and Serenity fan. I didn't watch it when it first came out.
Okay.
I actually didn't discover it until the movie came out. I had never even heard of the show. And then when the movie came out, a friend of mine told me, "Oh, well, have you seen the show?" "What show?" "Firefly." Never even heard of it. So I went back and watched it all, and now I'm a fan. But I'm kind of with you on that. Like, I used to rewatch Firefly and Serenity about once, maybe every other year. I tried turning it on a couple of months ago, and I couldn't do it. I got 5-10 minutes into it. I'm like, nope.
I discovered Firefly because I watched Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog. And after I watched it, that was back when Netflix used to push. I watched the movie because I'm a NPH fan, but it recommended Firefly to me after it was over because, you know, it's like a 45-minute movie. And I started watching it, man, and I fell in love with Firefly. And I would say I'm a big fan.
Okay.
But I'm not a Whedon fan, man. I can't support the guy. He's a bully.
The more time passes, the more I realize that Josh Whedon is just a dick.
He's sleazy.
And the more stories I've read and heard about him over the years, it's like, hey, you know, I can't support this guy.
Look, they're not all making it up.
No.
I mean, look, if you've ever heard Charisma Carpenter talk about her experience.
I have.
That's traumatic enough. But then to hear James Marsters
Yeah.
talk about being bullied by Joss Whedon, that to me speaks more to it than anything else. Because, you know, I look at Joss Whedon and he wouldn't intimidate somebody like James Marsters, but yet he did. But that's the power. You know, Charisma Carpenter talked about how you would go to these cons and she would want to speak out. But you're talking about a group of people, hundreds of thousands of people wearing T-shirts that say, you know, Whedon is my God.
Yeah.
How do you fight against something like that? So we've been talking about guilty pleasure movies, and I think I want to bring up at least what I feel is our favorite shared guilty pleasure movie, which is Clue.
God, we'll love that movie.
Clue is a part of my childhood, but very much a part of my adulthood. And I quote it all the time.
Yeah, I'm like 8-10 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and maybe not a movie as a kid I should have watched.
It's risque.
I mean,
there's
sexual innuendo.
There's no nudity.
No.
And I don't think there's any F-bombs.
Oh, and there's murder, man. There's murder. 5 or 6 people get killed right off the bat.
Yeah, but this is the U.S., man. Murder is not as bad as sex when it comes to movies.
Wow, what could be more American than that?
Exactly. Such a great movie. I'd be remiss if I didn't get this out of the way first before we get into it, though. But you know the whole judging you by where you know Tim Curry from?
Yes.
That's how I know Tim Curry originally, is Clue. I grew up watching it on HBO when I was a kid.
Tim Curry is one of those people that before I knew Tim Curry's name, I called him Wadsworth because of Clue. Because I knew that name. He was Wadsworth, man. I didn't know actors' names when I was a kid.
No. Speaking
of actors and star-studded casts, that movie is a who's who of 80s comedians.
Across the board, I can't stress this enough how great a movie this is.
Look, Martin Mull, Michael McKean, at their best.
Well, and you know, that's the first thing I ever saw either one of those in. It's hard for me to pinpoint like what I want to talk about specifically with this movie because there's so much going on. I mean, it's...
Well, look, starting from the beginning, all right? So this is a movie, it's a murder mystery. And yes, it's based on a board game.
What I love the most about it is like the little subtle hints in the plot about each character. How exaggerated everybody's role is. You know, everybody's over the top in this movie. And normally, that doesn't work. You know, if everybody's trying to be Jim Carrey in a movie, it gets overloaded.
Well, I was going to say, you know, in a movie like Clue, there is no breakout over-the-top character because they're all over-the-top
Exactly,
characters.
And that's the point. Because, you know, where the bit where she goes on and on about the tiny little whatever in her head, and she's like slowly but surely getting more and more maddening as she's going through the scene.
Like a cloud?
Yes. And it doesn't make any sense and it has no point. And it's just utterly ridiculous. But yet in that movie, it's perfect.
When Michael McKean, Mr. Green,
yeah,
slaps Mrs. Peacock across the face and does the classic, well, I had to stop her from screaming, is only surpassed by when Tim Curry reenacts the moment and so perfectly does the voice. He does the whole bit and he looks like he's, well, I had to stop her from screaming. And it just, look, for as much as this man hates Nicolas Cage, we love Tim Curry that much more.
Everybody in it is fun. And even the characters who die. Yvette is fun. The motorist.
The motorist, the cook, the policeman, the singing telegram girl.
I believe it's if I'm not mistaken, it's policeman that had kind of bug eyes to
Yes,
him.
yes, he did.
And the way that guy played his eyes in that part for just a little bit he's in it was great.
Oh, visually entertaining.
The reenactment of the chef getting stabbed. But that's the thing though, they were all great in it.
They were all great in that movie.
They were all great in it. Miss Scarlet was great. Mrs. White was great. Miss Peacock was great.
But if you haven't seen Clue, you are missing out. So see it before they remake it.
Yes, and we won't get into the details of this, but we have had a conversation about our fictional recasting of Clue and who we would choose in all the roles, all the way down to the director.
I would love to have a conversation about fictional casting. Or dream casting, as it were.
And we will do that. We just won't do that today. Either way, Clue is a fun movie, and one of those movies that, as great as it is, if they do it right, I don't mind a remake.
Well, I've heard talk of the remake and that Ryan Reynolds is attached to the project.
It's Ryan Reynolds and someone else, and
Jason Bateman is the second that was attached to the
that is
project.
yes.
Which I would have been down for. I'm a big Jason Bateman fan.
Me as well. He has come back with a vengeance over the years and played in a lot of fun, good things.
And some Ozark, some dark roles.
I love Ozark.
I know you're a fan.
I feel like the last season kind of let me down toward the end, but the first 3 seasons.
How many shows can you say that about?
Too many.
Exactly.
It's unfortunate.
Game of Thrones was a huge letdown.
I think the pandemic kind of messed up the last season of Ozark because there was a big gap and everything was weird. And I think they just finished it weird. But, it was still a good show. Like the show. Love Jason Bateman. Have you ever seen The Kingdom? Jamie Foxx, Chris Cooper, I want to say Jessica Biel.
No.
No, it's Jennifer Garner. She's the one in that. Jason Bateman gets kidnapped.
Okay.
And he's about to be beheaded on screen.
And this is a comedy?
No. God, no.
Oh, I thought you said this was a comedy.
No. Action movie.
Oh, okay.
Action, drama, whatever. Anyway, Jason Bateman gets kidnapped in this movie. His portrayal of that part in that moment is one of the most intense things I've ever seen on any screen. Because it's pure terrified. Because, he's a white American kidnapped in the Middle East and is about to be beheaded with a camera in front of him. And it is... I don't know, I'm lacking words for it. It's so intense. Like, it's one of the most intense things I've ever seen. And he does it so well.
Jason Bateman is a very underrated dramatic actor because of a lot of the comedic roles he's taken. But when you see him dive into a moment like what you're describing, it's so real. It's so real. He has that craft instilled in him that he can become not necessarily the character, but the moment.
Well, at the very beginning of Ozark, first season, episode 1, he's about to die. And his partner is killed right in front of him. And he manages to talk his way out of death from the Mexican mafia. He talks his way out of it. But he plays that same kind of terrified, only it's crazy. That character, Marty Bird in Ozark, is one of the most stoic characters I've ever seen because he doesn't react to anything. Like his character in that, he can be threatened with death, which he is several times over because of the people he associates with, and is cool-headed all the time and never reacts to anything.
And when you see him play something like that, it's easy to forget that he played Pepper opposite Cotton in Dodgeball.
Working for the Ocho.
Oh my God, the Ocho.
Yes,
if it's
sir.
almost a sport.
If it's almost a sport. Jason Bateman he's been a fun guy over the years. I grew up with him in the 80s and early 90s on the Hogan Family.
I remember the Hogans. The zombie episode.
He was the older brother.
Terrified the shit out of me when I was a kid. Look.
That was one of my regular shows when it was out. I don't know. I was 10 maybe.
You were age appropriate for the show.
Yeah, because the younger two brothers were maybe a tad bit older than me, but they were close to my age.
Sure.
At the time. And, Jason Bateman, I just, back then, was just like, he's the asshole older brother. So I didn't think much about the guy. He did some things here and there. And then I think in the 90s, he disappeared. Probably did some work. I don't know. Early 2000 comes back, and then Arrested Development comes out. And we've discussed at length how great that show is and the cast and everything about it.
Now that's guilty pleasure.
Absolutely. But it's also original 3 seasons is classic.
The original 3 seasons are great.
But he still kind of plays that, like, yes, it's in a comedic way, but it's actually kind of similar to how he plays Marty Bird in Ozark, with the fact that all this crazy stuff happens around him and he's just straight-laced through most of it. Doesn't crack a grin or a frown either way, doesn't raise an eyebrow, and it's just like, and then finally it's just like, whatever, and moves on about his business. Because it's like everyday life for him, because his family is nuts.
Well, there's a lot of pleasures in this world, but the best ones make you feel a little guilty. Until next time.
That's Wes.
And he's Corey, and we're the Triflemen.